the Isle of Raasay. Despite only being 15 miles long, this island was one of the toughest places I've ever been bikepacking. Its remoteness and brutal weather pushed me to my absolute limits, both physically and mentally. This was one of the most challenging bikepacking films I've ever made. So I've not had the best day. I got a notification on my phone this morning from CalMac, it's the guys that organise the ferries around here, saying that they've all been cancelled because of the bad winds, and it is very, very windy. They said they might try running one again at 5:30 this evening. I really hope they do, because there's just nothing open and nothing to do on this island other than just set up camp again, which I really don't want to do. If I can get off here, it'll be brilliant, but let's see. But the worst part of all about today is I've been an absolute idiot, and I flew my drone knowing that it can handle very windy days, and I've gone and lost it. It's flown over there somewhere. I tried to control it. I put it in sport mode, trying to blast it back, and normally it's fine, but it just wouldn't come back. It was just flying further and further away. So I spent the last couple of hours trying to find it. It showed up on a map on the app, and I just couldn't find it anyway. I was scrambling up cliff faces in this atrocious wind, trying to get to it, and it just was nowhere to be found. It's not worth breaking a leg over, because it was bloody treacherous up there. So I've just had to leave it, which is gutting, really. It's a lot of money down the drain. But yeah, so I'm really annoyed at myself. But anyway, I just try and look at it and think it's only stuff. Like, you know, I can always try and get another one, even though my bank account won't thank me for it. You know, it's just stuff. Anyway, that's my day so far. So I'm going to ride back to the ferry terminal and hopefully get in the waiting room somewhere and stay out this wind until the ferry arrives, hopefully this evening. Yeah. Unfortunately, things went from bad to worse and the storm got even worse. I was getting hammered by an atrocious headwind and it made cycling really difficult. You can see here I was doing between 3 and 4 miles per hour, and that was my average speed for the whole day. Some bits were so treacherous because of the crosswinds from different angles. It made cycling almost impossible at times. I had to walk the bike, which made my average speed even lower. I hadn't seen a single person since I first arrived on the island. There's a cluster of villages around the ferry terminal, and pretty much from that point onwards there is nothing. There's only a few houses and farms dotted around, and I hadn't seen a single person. By some miracle, however, a guy showed up behind me in a pickup truck and asked if I wanted a lift, and I took him up on it because it was so windy. I just felt like I was never going to make it to the ferry terminal. At this point, I was only a couple of miles away. I'd had enough. He strapped my bike to the back of his pickup truck and he kindly drove me the last couple of miles to the ferry terminal. I was so glad of it. As soon as I got to the ferry terminal, it was like I could properly relax. I was absolutely exhausted. Being in that ferry terminal, there was no one there. It was sheltered from the wind, and the storm was getting even worse at this point, believe it or not. So I was just glad to be out of it. I didn't catch his name, unfortunately, so if by any remote chance you know who this kind chap was, please feel free to leave a comment and let me know. I'd love to get in touch with him and thank him personally for looking after me for those last couple of miles. So all in all, definitely not one of my most enjoyable trips. However, the Isle of Raasay is absolutely beautiful, and I would love to come back on a day where I'm not at risk of being blown off into the sea. Even so, it was an exciting adventure, even though it didn't quite go to plan, as is often the way with bikepacking. So I actually drove from my house in Yorkshire up to the Isle of Skye through kind of Loch Alsh over the Skye Bridge, which I've never driven over. I normally get the ferry from Mallaig across to the Isle of Skye, but this time I decided to drive, and then I drove to Sconser, and that's where I got the ferry over to the Isle of Raasay. It was like £4 for the return ferry, and there was nobody using it the first way there. It was just me and a Royal Mail post van, nothing else at all. So I was the only bike on there. I didn't need to book or anything like that. It was super easy to get on. When you get to the Isle of Raasay, there's effectively one major village, and that's where the distillery is and the other tourist attractions, if you like. But there's also a nice little community village shop, which was really cute, really. It had everything you needed for a bikepacking trip. So if you're going over there, you can stock up there. It's really handy. The only problem with it is it's not open on Sundays, which was the day I was wanting to come back. Hence me saying there was just nothing open and nothing to do. I was stuck on that tiny island with no way of getting off. Nothing to do at all. The route took me through tiny settlements called Arnish and Torren, following Callum's Road, which was a road made entirely by one person, Callum, over the space of 10 years, which was amazing to see. There's a monument dedicated to him on the road, and it's quite interesting. If you have the time and you're not being battered by winds, it's quite an interesting read. When you get to the very top of the road on the island, there's another island which is literally separated by maybe 5 to 10 metres of water, called Fladder, and there are some houses on there as well. I'm not actually quite sure how you get there. I'm assuming you'd need a little boat to cross because there's no road or anything, but there are a few houses which seem to be completely empty. My plan was actually to follow the footpath up to a bothy that I'd found even further north on the Isle of Raasay. So there's no road at this point, it was entirely footpath. I followed it for maybe a mile or two before realising that it probably wasn't the best idea. I really wanted to go to this bothy and to check it out, and that had been my plan all along, but the wind became so strong and it was so boggy that actually getting my bike across this couple of miles was really challenging, and there was a couple of gates and stiles as well, which made it really challenging. So in the end I thought, I'm going to have to get out this wind. I could feel it picking up. I went back down the hill to an area that was a bit more wooded and out of the wind. I actually set up the tent next to one house which seemed like it was occupied in some respects, but there was no sign of life anywhere when I went. I'm guessing it's used as like a holiday home or something, but the fact that the ground was flat and I was a little bit more sheltered from the wind, it meant that I could set up the tent really easily. Day 2 was the day where everything kind of started to go downhill. As you can see from this clip, when I got up in the morning, the wind was already picking up, and it only proceeded to get worse from that point onwards. It was then I got the notification about the ferries being cancelled, so I thought I'll just take my time heading back to the ferry terminal, get as much filming in as I possibly can, and just hope that that 5:30 ferry came. After a mile or two of riding, it was at this point I realised I'm going to really struggle to make any sort of film with the weather as it was. Every time I tried to set up the tripod, it would get blown over. I filmed in strong winds before, but this was so strong that any time I tried to set up the camera at all, it just wouldn't stay upright. Further to that, me flying the drone during the day and then losing it, having that disaster that I'm still really annoyed about, meant that I basically had no option to get any sort of decent footage. So my mindset switched. Instead of making an amazing film, let's just get back to the ferry terminal and hope that I can get back to my car on the Isle of Skye. I'm trying to be more efficient with my time this year, so I had planned on doing another bikepacking trip on the Isle of Skye as soon as I got back from the Isle of Raasay. I was really looking forward to doing that, but because the storm was getting even worse, I decided to call it a day and drive all the way back home once I finally got back onto the island. So it's not how I intended the trip to go, but I hope you enjoyed that nonetheless. Make sure you subscribe, give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.